Excited to be wrapping up the conf. Yeah, this is not an Astro talk. So if everyone's like seen Astro, don't like it, this is very much a view transitions talk. I will of course be touching on what we're doing that makes this so special in Astro, but this is a cool browser technology that we've been really pioneering. But it is a browser tech first and foremost. It's something that the browser has added that the browser kind of unlocks for then individual developers, frameworks. It's so new, like everyone's trying to figure out different ways to apply this technology. So I'm really excited to show you all just a full walkthrough of what it is, how you can use it, no matter what your tech stack is, and what it means for the future of the web. I'll start this off. Yeah, they tackle my intro. I'm Fred. I co-created Astro with a couple other smart people, and I'm currently acting as a project steward. Um, this is an Astro demo, and if you know Astro, you're thinking like static sites, content sites. What's this app doing? This must have been like a ton of front end JavaScript. This must be like a full spa, right? To be this must have taken a team of developers at Spotify working months, midnights, long weeks just to build. But the reality is that this is actually mostly powered by the browser with HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. So HTML, this is server rendered HTML. Every transition you see in this demo is the page responding with a full page of HTML, and the browser animating that transition. CSS is actually telling the browser how to animate it. So you see some fades, some cool pop-ups, some cool navigation. Everything has different control, all under the full flexibility of CSS. So a ton of flexibility and expressiveness there. And then a little bit of JavaScript to wire it all together. So again, this isn't like, oh, what megabyte large animation library are you bringing in? Instead, it's actually how are you hooking up the browser to handle this for you with the CSS styling and the HTML. All that brings together this demo, which was built by a single Astro community member, just to showcase how easy some of this tech is to use and how quickly you can get really, really beautiful experiences built together. Again, regardless of framework that you choose to use this view transition tech in. Um, this is just a whole. I have no idea how well this is going to work on screen share, so just bear with me. But hopefully, this is beautiful as it is on my screen. We have people
Fred,
building.
sorry to interrupt you. I believe your
Yeah, please.
slides froze.
Oh no! Oh no! Is
There we
that
go.
working? I
Yeah, that was
had
good.
two windows open. Oh, thank you for saying something. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
sure.
Okay, so pretend everything I just said. You were looking at this beautiful Spotify demo.
It's beautiful.
Thank you for jumping in.
Yeah, sure.
Um, Yeah, to recap, this is server rendered HTML that's presenting the page, CSS, which is styling the animations, and the only bit of JavaScript is wiring up the browser to actually run the animation logic for you. So you're telling the before and after state, the browser is doing the heavy lifting of animation. Super cool, super powerful. This is not a spa. This is server rendered HTML with CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. Build in Astro, but again, anyone could be building this with view transitions today. All right. Now, hopefully, this also not only is this beautiful on your screen, it also is actually visible on your screen. This is just a collection of different ways that people have been applying this across the Astro community. You have a blog in the top left showing these really nice transitions across posts and across pages. An actual audio player, which we're actually going to dig into later on. Another blog that's showing a kind of more slide transition, so a little bit lower powered. And of course, a kind of like e-commerce catalog, cool sticker navigator built by Addy over at Google. So super, super cool tech that people are using in all sorts of interesting ways to kind of push the boundary of this. Because again, very new, very new in the browser, and so there's just so much unexplored space here that people are starting to play around with. I've kind of tipped my hand a little bit. I've been talking about how this is just HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript. But to really hit this home, this is all possible with a single line of HTML, a new meta tag called view transition with this content tag. If you add this to your site, you're going to get view transitions enabled automatically. Um, I say, wait, really? Okay, you're going to get view transitions. It might not look like that Spotify demo, but they are going to be enabled and fully powered by the browser. That's the future that the browsers are working towards. And the rest of this talk is essentially describing how you can move there with them and how kind of the current state of things is. But the end goal that everyone is working towards is that you can do something this simple to enable simple view transitions on your site. So the simplicity that the browser provides us versus a super low level, super complex. This is the goal that browsers are working towards and that we're trying to align ourselves with. This is where we get into the well, kinda the wait really part of it. Obviously, in anything on the web stack in the platform of the web, you have to worry about browser support. What framework does React support this better than Svelte supports this? Accessibility is something we hear all the time that I'm going to touch on. And then also, what kind of transitions do you want to build? Like default fades, there's some cool morphing stuff, slides, custom transitions. Persistent transitions is a really interesting one that Astro is actually pioneering, the idea of an element like an audio player moving across pages without being reset. There's some really cool stuff here. It's all exactly what I'm kind of touching on this as a kind of wild west of figuring this out right now. But you can see this support is shipped natively in Chrome. It's in Edge. It's in Opera. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about of Astro's approach is actually to polyfill the remaining browsers. So you can use this in Astro today with support across all of these browsers, not just the ones that support it. So that brings us to Astro, the kind of how we got here part of the story. Astro is a web framework for building content sites, first and foremost, mostly. So anything that is traditionally about getting content in front of the user, whether it's a marketing page, a blog, an e-commerce shop, even if the job is to get something quickly to a user, where any kind of content at all, Astro is really designed for that use case. We kind of see that in opposition to maybe a more app-like, if you're trying to build the next Facebook, that's not really what Astro is designed for. We're really focused on that content story. And recently had our Astro 3.0 launch, which really, really brought this View Transition API into the stable release. So it's stable, it's released, it's a part of Astro. I think we're on Astro 3.6 now, so this has been well baked into Astro at this point, with a lot of nice improvements along the way. I have a video here. I'm going to actually be watching chat with the backstage people, so you don't have to
Look
jump
at
on.
that.
Let me know if this audio is working through the stream. Not required, but it's cool. This is a video of Theo.
Look at
Yep,
that.
the audio works, just letting you know.
Fantastic. Theo's a
I
live
thought my
streamer. He's
website was
using.
laid out
Okay,
differently. I
well then
haven't
I'll
checked
pause.
it for a
Actually, I'll
while.
look over it. Um, Theo has been a longtime user of Astro. He used it back in like the O.X days when it was just O.X software. But this is just to give an example of how easy this is to use in Astro. I'm going to hit home his migration story of how this works in adding it to an Astro site today.
Look at that. I also thought my website was laid out differently. I haven't checked it for a while, but I want to try these view transitions. So let's do it. Add it inside any page's head element. Index, import, YOLO. Oh, that's really nice. Now I need to add that to everything. Cool.
Yeah. So again, hopefully with the stream, you can see the kind of nice fade animation just with one line of HTML, essentially, specifically Astro component syntax. He was able to add this view transition to his site with a really simple fade animation. So as the browser moves there, we are trying to build into Astro this exact idea of how easy this can be when the browser is powering it. So we weren't able to hit one line, but we did get it into. You have to import this component from the Astro transitions identifier, and then you can use it anywhere on your site. So if we see this on your page, we're going to enable view transitions across any browser, not just the ones that natively support it, but we'll polyfill it in the old ones as well. And this is where we see frameworks, not just Astro, but any framework really stepping in to help. Like with anything, the browser is a multifaceted, some browsers support one thing, some support another. And really, frameworks have always taken this role of filling in the gaps and easing out the gaps. So all the way back to jQuery, right? That is a long history of that goal for good frameworks. So that's our goal with view transitions in Astro 3, having good browser fallbacks, having really good accessibility by default, and having some really cool built-in animations. So we'll get into the CSS of it, but you don't even have to write your own CSS if you want to. We'll have a couple out of the box for you to use as soon as you try it out. I'll go into the just nitty gritty details. Again, this is purely if you're just curious how it works because it is really wild tech. The browser essentially gives you this API called Start View Transition, which lets you navigate from the start to the end state. So the browser really thinks about the old and the new. When you call start view transition, you've started the view transition. So the browser is essentially taken a screenshot of the current page. It's pretty wild. And then you are free to move the page around. So you can change CSS so that it gets restyled. You can delete something. You can remove something. You basically have the full freedom to change the page content as you see fit. Again, this is something where if you're a raw jQuery developer, you're querying and dot removing and dot append siblinging. But if you're using React or Svelte or Vue, you're just basically having your app re-render in the new state. That finishes up. The browser takes a look at the page, it sees the before, it sees the after, and then it animates the transition between those two states. Again, these are the details you don't need to worry too much about, but I will kind of touch on this API. You're going to see it in a second as we learn how you can style this. Essentially, again, the browser is doing the work to create a pseudo element of the old and the new. So you can look here at view transition old, view transition new. That's what you're going to select on to start to style the old and the new. There's a link here. Again, just Googling around for some of this information. The Chrome developer blog has been essential for some of this stuff. So you can see this link here. Um, I'm sure someone will post it in chat, or you can just Google view transitions, and this is one of the top things that comes up. Let's get into some of the actual how this works, though. Again, this is all framework agnostic. We haven't even touched any Astro code yet at this stage. We're just showing how you can animate the old and the new. This small snippet is telling the browser, hey, make this a 5-second animation for the old to fade out and the new to fade in. So you're styling them both equally slow, in my opinion. But no matter how bad the stream quality might be, you probably see this transition just kind of eking along at 5 seconds. That's pretty brutal. So yeah, this is literally as simple as it is. There's an animation that is the default the browser gives you, which is that fade I mentioned, and now we're not even touching it. We're just changing it and tweaking it, making it a little bit slower. This shows kind of the ends of where you could go, and you could probably even go way further than this, but this is actually a more advanced use of it. You can see them not just creating a slide animation, but a pretty snappy little slide animation. There's like a pop, slide, fade thing going on that's pretty cool. But again, we haven't left CSS at this point. We are transitioning the old out and the new in. We aren't even touching HTML or JS. This is just CSS on the pseudo elements that the browser is giving us. In this case, we are animating the fade out and the slide to the left animations, which are defined up here in these keyframes. So really cool to see this. Just all CSS, full animations, not a line of JavaScript to be seen is really cool. Given the history of, again, I mentioned jQuery. Animations used to be pretty wild before CSS even had animation support. The browser has come such a long way to now be able to actually orchestrate the animation, not just animate it beautifully. The last thing I'll touch on here, which is a little bit of just a little tangent we're going to take. This is not just for page transitions. A lot of what Astro does is creating a really smooth page transition because that's what we see our users. It's like kind of the most common use case we see for transitions on the web. But here's a couple of just examples of how this is an API that is as low level as you want it to be. These are different actual experiences on a page that are not related to animation, that are not related to page transitions that are powered by view transitions. So again, this is that heavy lifting that you might have had to have done yourself in JavaScript or have relied on a SPA application architecture. Instead, you just have this all powered by the browser, no library needed. Big credit to Adam Argyle, who's been doing a lot of this work. I think all of these, or at least this one that he's credit. I think all of these are his. He's just has so much fun with this on Twitter and then actually shares it, so we get to grab cool videos. Shout out to Adam. He is awesome. What I've showed you so far, that document.start view transition, there was JavaScript, right? So we are telling right now the browser how to orchestrate start, and JavaScript is responsible for coordinating that. This is where they're trying to get to, which is no JavaScript needed at all. The meta tag defines the view transition as something you've opted into, so all HTML. The CSS styles it, but essentially this is automatic page transitions. This is currently specced out. This is not currently implemented in any browser. The closest anyone's gotten, Chrome has it behind a flag in Canary. I believe that's still the case. It might be in mainstream, but still behind a flag. It's fairly experimental at this stage. So this is where everyone's going, but this is still fairly new. But again, this is where Astro and other frameworks can step in and actually provide something that feels a lot like this. But yeah, that chart I showed you with Chrome and Edge, that's that JavaScript support. So today in mainstream Chrome, and actually for a while now, mainstream Chrome, mainstream Edge have had support for view transitions. This slide is slightly out of date. I bet it's a bit higher now in terms of global coverage. But Safari, Firefox still do not have support as of today. And this gets into how, again, I keep hitting this narrative of frameworks can fill the gaps. Astro has gone all the way to full-on polyfill native support. I'll shout out a couple of other projects that are also pushing this narrative forward, pushing this tech forward. So Svelte and SvelteKit, HTMX, and Nuxt all have support for tying their framework somehow into this document.startViewTransition API. So if you want to use it yourself, you can. Next is experimental. Svelte has landed, and HTMX has actually had it longer than any of us. So shout out to the meme lords over at HTMX for seeing the future before any of us did. Nux as well, to be fair, has had experimental support for a long time now. The big thing again that I'll keep hitting on is where everyone else has gone so far is letting you use these APIs if you choose to, and where Astro is unique is in actually building it into the framework. Um, yeah, let's talk about this because I think it's really important. Like, why would we do this when no one else would? It's not that we're like weirdos who, well, we are weirdos who love view transitions, but more to the point, this is actually solving a real big need for us. So if you know anything about Astro, that content site focus led us to an architecture that actually moved us away from the SPA architecture that I would say most other JavaScript frameworks fall under. Next.js, SvelteKit, Nuxt, what they all do, the way that they architect your site is that there's essentially an application running on the front end that is responsible for rendering your page. And the server exists to basically server render that logic to maybe make it a bit faster. But at the end of the day, what you're shipping is a JavaScript app. You can speed it up and you can pull a couple of cool tricks, but at the end of the day, your site is a JavaScript app. Really cool for apps, pretty terrible user experience for anyone trying to ship a lot of content to the user quickly. So coming from Google, you got to see that content and you got to maybe interact with it. That can mean a lot of server rendering complexity, front end application complexity, and then how are you hydrating that and getting that interactive when what you really have is an application. Astro's architecture went the other route, which is the more traditional, what people kind of call the MPA, which is really just trying to say there isn't a JavaScript app. The server is responsible for the HTML you get back. Um, in contrast, this means that the server is sending HTML, and the user coming from Google essentially just has to load that HTML, CSS, and any JavaScript that's needed. But you haven't baked in the concept of an application. It's a page, not an application. This is really cool for our use cases. Anyone building marketing pages, home pages, blogs, and e-commerce. It really makes a lot of sense for that. But you still do need some interactive content. So that's where we had this idea of starting from there and letting you build these interactive components, these JavaScript-enabled components on the page, using this islands architecture as more like widgets or pieces of the page versus the full thing being a JavaScript app. The trade-off, the thing we intentionally made there is that we did not have nice page transitions. When you clicked a page, a new link, the browser asked the server for HTML, and then the browser took that request, that response, the browser was in charge of everything, and the browser was a pretty blunt instrument. So you move across pages, you have no control other than, that you end up on the right location, kind of throwing someone over a wall from page to page. This is how the web has always worked, but SPAs have had this really cool idea of because they're a JavaScript app, there's not actually a browser navigation happening. It's kind of all faked. It's the JavaScript app that is re-rendering a new part of the page. So SPAs can do some really cool transition stuff and have been able to for a while now because it isn't actually a browser navigation. It's a client-side kind of faux navigation. So long story short, we never had this ability. We were super jelly all the time. And what view transitions gave us was a way to, within our model of a browser-enabled page transition, um, we didn't have to sacrifice that power of being able to actually animate or kind of just improve that animation, so that transition experience from just being thrown over a wall. So what started as a weakness of us, Astro versus SPAs, is now one of our biggest strengths. We have page transitions, and they're actually as lightweight as possible because the browser is doing all the work. That's why we ultimately had the incentive to go after this, where others, if you already have this feature, why would you go and re-architect it? What you have is already good. But for us, this was actually a totally new thing. The last thing I'll kind of touch on in comparison of how Astro's approached this is, again, we see our role as making this as easy to use as possible, as baked into the Astro experience. Whereas other frameworks right now, they're, again, because they don't have that need, they're more letting you use it for what you want. So unnamed framework X on the right is a really good example of where most other frameworks are today. They want to expose this API, but ultimately it's on you to use it. So this is not a judgment call or a moral call. This is a totally fine approach, but I think it really hits home our approach to view transitions, which is much more a baked in feature of Astro versus just giving you an API and letting you do with it what you will. So two totally different approaches, both valid. And yeah, we're really happy with ours. And I think Framework X is pretty happy with theirs as well. I'm just going to run through a couple of quick videos just to show you how this can work. This is our control case. There's no view transitions here. You're going from page to page. You saw that back. It was kind of flashy. This is the MPA, right? The classic browser-powered page transition. By adding those 2 lines I mentioned, the import and then actually using the component, we now get that default fade. So this is the browser. Default behavior is to give you a fade. We actually the default fade's nice. It's a little slow. We kind of spruce it up a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's that default browser fade plus plus. A little bit nicer in our eyes as a default, but still powered by the browser. Now you might see something in here on the top right. You kind of see the toolbar also fading, and it kind of looks a little off. Again, I don't know if y'all can see that. The boldness of the text fades with the kind of repositioning as the text gets wider. Kinda gross. So, I'll kinda show you how you can get rid of that, in a second. Um, in 1 second when I first show this. Here's another animation, it's a slide. I thought that's what came next. The slide animation shows you going from page to page. So, with just this one attribute, you can go from page to page. Again, you didn't have to style this yourself. This is one of the cool things that Astro gives you. Totally built in, just use the word slide. No CSS you need to write. We have these out of the box animations, which are really cool. Now, to solve this problem, there we are. Um, what you can add is another animation directive, which is the transition animate none directive. So this is saying, hey, some parts of the page, not everything needs to be faded. You kind of saw in the example before, not everything needs to be slid around the page. The idea here is that some things maybe you want to keep kind of stable and standard. So the idea of if you're navigating across pages, the navigation probably shouldn't be zooming around. It should probably stay pretty stable. The app shell. So this is super easy to do in Astro as well. You just add this directive to any element, and it will stay right where it is, no longer animated, while the rest of the page can still be whatever you want it to be. The last example I'll show is this morph animation. You probably saw this in a couple of the other examples so far. This is, again, totally powered by the browser. The browser is detecting that one element exists on both pages. Instead of swapping it out, clearing it out, and creating a new one, it's actually morphing that element from old to new. This requires a little bit of work to hook up the old and the new. You can kind of see it in 2 places here instead of 1. We're actually naming this element with a transition name. So in this case, it's hero colon and the actual image URL is going to be anything. So we're going to use a unique identifier here. And likewise here on the new article page, we're going to do that there as well. And the video, I think, speaks for itself. You kind of see this now actually morph and move while the rest of the page still keeps its nice fade. You have that one kind of image or that one kind of splashy element that actually moves around the page. So 2 lines of code here needed to do this. Really, you're just identifying the element in the old and the new so that the browser can stitch the 2 together. And yeah, you can kind of see how as you go through this, you can start to build something like this, right? There's fade, there's morph. The browser's doing a lot of the work, but you're able to still style what you need. All of these things that we've been building up and up and up towards kind of end you up here using only CSS, HTML, server rendered HTML, and a little bit of JavaScript. So yeah, super cool, awesome demo from our community. I'll touch on a couple of things as we wrap up here, because again, this is all available to try out in Astro today or in any framework and browser if you want to use that low-level API. So plenty of different ways to try this out in any tech stack. One big thing that we get all the time is, hold on, you're telling me that the web now is going to be like this super movement-y, like a mess, right? That everyone I think sees this and they kind of freak out a little bit of like, where are you taking the web? I think a big thing is as always, it's up to the developer or the designer maybe to make sure that you don't go overboard. A site that is all over the place and animating every little thing, that's just a bad site at the end of the day. So I think I don't share the same kind of fear that the web will become any worse through this. I think if anything, it just gives a little bit more power without the weight of a JavaScript library that maybe someone was already reaching for today. But accessibility is always a serious concern, right? Accessibility is this idea of, listen, I don't care if you think it looks pretty. This is actually not accessible to me. Maybe I have some reason why I can't view motion, or it's painful, or it's inaccessible to me. That person obviously can't be shut out of this experience. So this is really interesting. I found this is super interesting. I think it makes sense why the browser went with essentially leaving this in your hands as a developer. It's up to you to add this CSS to say, hey, listen, if the user prefers reduced motion, you should disable an animation. But it doesn't do it by default, which is basically them saying, listen, not all animations are inaccessible or have the potential to be inaccessible. So it really is in your hands, which I think I do see the fear there of that being a little risky, right? If no one knows what this is and knows how to configure it, they might not realize that they're creating inaccessible experiences. In Astro, we disable all of our animations by default. That's what we think the best default is for a user who maybe is just trying this out. But you still obviously have this ability to go into low-level API and configure this yourself. I think that's the big thing that everyone's trying to figure out. What is the right default? The browser says not our responsibility. It's your responsibility as a developer. And again, going back to frameworks, responsibility in the story, a framework can kind of help guide and help smooth out those edges. One last cool feature that Astro does, again, I mentioned this at the top where we kind of are pioneering a bit, is this idea of a persistent element. This is not currently in the spec, but we are baking it into our support so that people have this ability to build persistent elements across navigation. So as you navigate across the site, you can see this audio player in the bottom thing, and now it is persisting across pages. If there was audio here, you would hear a song playing. This is a really, really cool feature of Astro's transition support because it actually is keeping that element across full page navigations with all the powers of view transition. So super, super cool. I'll just jump to the next one where you can see how this all comes together. You have an e-commerce site here, which is using that feature to power a chat widget. So, and a shopping cart, I believe. So again, seeing how all this comes together, you can build really, really powerful things that are really great looking without a ton of work. And not just this looks pretty, but it actually gives you something that wasn't possible before. Stuff like persistent elements across pages, so that you have this nice chat widget, or again a shopping cart. So yeah, another great demo coming out of our community, just showcasing how powerful view transitions are and how powerful they are in Astro specifically. So check out Baptiste's Twitter if you want to see more of this cool stuff. All right, we're wrapping up here. That's view transitions. That's view transitions with Astro 3. All that great stuff. If you want to use this API but are worried about browser support, having good defaults, styling a bunch of stuff yourself, Astro gives you all of these things out of the box for you to try and play around with it. If you love it in Astro, bring it into your current site, build something new with Astro. All of these options are available to you. It's a tech that we're just super excited about because it opens up this door, not just for Astro, but for any MPA style site where a server is powering the page. You can now style that navigation without shipping a full JavaScript application to do so. So really cool tech. Please check it out. View transitions, Google it, check out Chrome's writing. And again, astro.build is the site to go to if you want to try this out in Astro. All right, that's my talk. Thank you so much for having me and for having me at the end of the conference. Whoa, y'all made it.
Yeah. I was just joking with Paul in our private chat. I said, we tricked them, Paul. They thought they were here for JavaScript and we gave them some CSS. We got
There you go.
got them.
There you go. Fred, I got two things for you. First, wow. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for carrying the flag for the web because this is great stuff. And second, screw you, because now I'm going to stare at my wall for 2 hours tonight thinking about the implications of what you said. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Colin, you
Yeah,
got any
yeah.
hot takes, quick reactions?
Well, I see a lot of people snarkily saying things like, "Oh, Flash is gonna come back," and doing this kind of stuff. But like to your point, it's like everything within reason, right? Like this is a powerful tool, but don't go crazy with it. Don't
Yeah.
throw animations everywhere, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
God. Real quick, I want to shout out a couple of people on the team because Nate
Yeah.
Moore started this exploration on our team, and Matthew Phillips, who's been leading the Astro project actually for a while now, he really kind of spearheaded this. So any credit really goes to them. They did an awesome job with this. Nate specifically actually went back and found old Snark when CSS animations were first launched. So a tech that's been in the browser for years now, and the exact same thing. This is going to ruin the web. I like my jQuery changing the width or the height actual attribute every X milliseconds. That's better than this animation monstrosity. And now obviously that's not the case. So I think the web will find a way. Good sites, beautiful sites succeed. Obviously
Well,
ugly sites people
the
can't use.
demo that kind of blew my mind when you were giving your presentation was reordering that list of items. Like, how often have people built reordering UIs?
Yeah.
And now you're telling
100%.
me I don't have to write JavaScript to get
DHTML. There's an O'Reilly DHTML book. It's got 3 chapters on this.
3 chapters, exactly. Yeah,
Look,
exactly. That's like a whole class of problem. You still have to wire it up, but you're now wiring up with the browser as kind of like your platform, your partner in it.
Look,
Okay,
I
Colin,
can
you
learn this stuff in
Colin,
24
you and I
hours
gotta
a
show
day.
we gotta show a little discipline and do some audience questions, and then we'll
All right.
get to our 4 hours of comments.
Well,
Okay.
okay, here I'm gonna pick one. I'm picking one, Paul. Here we go. So I guess people are like concerned about performance and kind of like here's a mention of someone saying like, how's this gonna affect my CPU and all that kind of stuff. So can you maybe get into the details of like what the browser's doing from a technical standpoint when these animations are firing?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bit of a, I'd say again, a collaboration between the site builder and then the browser platform doing the right thing. So, site builder, yeah, the more animations, this is a thing that your browser has to do. If things are flying around, it's gonna tax your GPU. Um,
Hmm.
Having said that, I do believe browsers are smart enough to not like, clip or freeze. Like you'll probably get a reduced, and again, this really comes down to each browser's implementation, but my understanding is you get much more of a reduced fidelity. So maybe it'll jump, jump, jump instead of the smooth transition. At the end of the day,
Hmm.
it shouldn't slow your site down. And at the end of the day, if that's something that really matters, the site builder should have that awareness that the more they lean into this, the more there is a potential for that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a valid concern, but I think it's one where the end state is not any worse than the web is today when you use animations.
Yeah, and I think folks should remember too, like a lot of the Chromium engines, they have GPU support. So, like if your iPhone's playing Resident Evil 4 remake or whatever right now, I think some animations are going to be
And
okay.
which one is gonna run on your GPU, your JavaScript or your CSS? Mhm.
Yep,
Okay, next
exactly.
one.
Yeah.
This is kind of reinforcing the points that we were making about the Flash and the stuff like that and the DHTML. Um, I think there's just a huge audience for this, and I think that there's an audience that has been forced to go to obscure API.js in order to scratch this itch. And I think that the thing that really struck me about what you're showing is this is declarative. This isn't imperative. And when we get back over to the declarative land, good things start happening over there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd shout out, I mean, like, Swap is a good example that comes to mind, like, people have built this. It's just always been, especially as we were looking at Astro, how do you do an animation when essentially the browser is changing from page to page? Like, you essentially have to, build in that SPA model of like, "All right, browser, you're not actually navigating, like, cut that out. We're gonna somehow" and now take on the responsibility of page navigation, which it's easier actually if you go into the full application model because now it's a different code path. But
Yeah.
to live in between the two without the browser kind of helping you out has always been really difficult. We tried Turbo Links built in Astro. We tried Swap.
Ah.
People got them pretty far, but there was always that. Well, make sure you don't do this, otherwise that
Mm,
breaks. And there was no easy solution to how
mm.
that should work.
Did TurboLinks want to have like HTTP headers that participated in the cooperation on these things?
Ooh, I don't remember that exact use case. I mean,
Mm.
at the end of the day, TurboLinks was such a Rails project. It
Yeah,
really
sure.
was pretty baked into Rails. But even for us, it was like, well, if the script is meant to rerun, it should live in the body when you navigate. But if it was only meant to run
Yeah.
once, it should live in the head. And like Astro was never like, oh, like tell us where you want your scripts to live. It's just like that is so not something were built for. So there was always some like, oh, make sure dot 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 that was really tough for us to either give our users or even just difficult for us to manage ourselves.
All right, we've got 5 minutes for some serious fanboy questions. So, Kyle, you let me take my one first.
Wait.
I
I want to.
appreciate it.
Well, I want to ask another web transitions because we got them. We got to ask them.
Gotta do it.
I legally can't leave. Well, we should be clear with the audience. Like, legally, I'm not
Yes,
allowed to leave.
yes. Our JetBrains ninjas are descending to your location right now. You're going to be here for a while. No, but something interesting when you were going through the demos, which kind of blew my mind, is you click something, an animation happened, but then you navigated backwards, and that navigation
Ah,
reversed itself.
yeah.
So it's like, are people getting 2 animations for the price of 1 amount of work put in?
Yeah, that's kudos for you catching that. That is actually
Yes,
something that
dude.
kind of surprised us. Like the slide animation, you're like, oh, cool, slide, and then you hit the back button, and it's like sliding the wrong way. It's like, oh, that's not at all what the that's really bad. Like no user expects that. Um, you have to handle that yourself. But again, there is that kind of like ability. I can't remember if that's fully CSS. There's probably a little bit of JavaScript. I'd have to check.
It's
Um,
unrelated
yeah,
to the state and the history API.
I really have to check. I don't remember how it's
That's fine.
implemented, but it is clearly possible. But not the default, which surprised everyone on the team when we first shipped that.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me zoom way out on this. You showed the can I use on this, and Firefox isn't there yet. Shockingly, Safari isn't there yet. This is my shocked face. But has there been any like vendor intent to implement? Has there been any signals in the mailing list
Oh,
that we
okay.
disagree with this fundamentally, we'll never do it, like web
I
SQL?
think everyone has expressed interest,
Okay,
and that's usually the kind of like hardest part to get over. If
it
anyone in
is.
chat corrects me, please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I think everyone is like on board with it. Maybe not all the way to the meta tag. I think that's still where that just feels
Mhm,
really kind of
mhm.
exploratory at this stage. But this start view transition, yeah, as you all saw, there's like clear use cases, not just in the page transition, but just in like, hey, move this tab or move this
Mhm,
drop
mhm,
down. All the browsers, I believe, are aligned on that at the very least.
mhm. Colin, I had 2 more questions. Do you wanna pipe in first?
No, I just kind of wanted to comment. I've noticed throughout the day people saying like traditional MPAs. And it's like, you know what? We were here first. We
That's right.
built websites this way.
Yeah.
Why are you saying traditional MPAs?
This
Like,
is an argument that no one is ever gonna like. It's the most niche argument, but I totally agree. Yeah.
yeah, come on, people. This is
We
how
have a
What is
word
websites
for
are
that.
defined? Yeah.
We have a word for that. It's called the web. Um
anyways.
So Fred, as someone who has a framework that is conceiving of these things kind of at the same time that the platform is doing something, what are some ways that frameworks can help glue things together? You mentioned the magic word app shell. And
Yeah.
so is there some things that can be done at a higher level to give people kind of developers, I should say, an out of the box experience?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, that's so I like that everyone's kind of taking a different path here. I think with something new like this, I'd rather see everyone try something new, we figure
Mhm.
it out, and then kind of bring it back. So yeah, I mentioned I won't even be able to kind of recap all of them, but I think the biggest things are that framework I showed earlier. Like most people right now are saying if you want to use this API directly, you can. And I think that's kind of with an eye for like the smaller use case, the individual experience versus the full page. Because again,
Mhm.
it's why we ended up here when others didn't. Like most frameworks don't need this for page transitions. They're like, we're good. We got the app, we got the JavaScript to run it. We'll just build it ourselves. Like this hasn't been blocked for us the same way it was for Astro. So I think if anyone was going to explore the page transition use case, it would be us and HTMX because again, there isn't
Yeah.
that SPA powering the thing. Whereas SvelteKit and Nuxt are more, I think, about listen, this API has multiple uses, and we want to make sure you have direct usage of that API in your
Yeah.
component specifically.
We'll start to wind up a little bit, so I will give you the serious fanboying now before asking you the final question. But thank you for carrying the flag on MPAs. Thank you for giving a shout out to Carson and HTMX. Thank you for talking about a declarative, accessible web architecture. I think it's just fantastic.
Agree.
This is just great stuff. So I will close with the question we've been asking everybody all day. We at WebStorm care a lot about developers on their journey from junior professionals to senior professionals. Do you have any advice for developers just getting started on their journey as someone who's gone through quite a journey?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm obviously biased, but I think one of the best things I ever did was get involved in open source. I think
Mm,
um, yeah, I was, a junior developer at, my first company I was ever working with as a developer. And, I was not able to do much. I was very much on my training wheels, rightfully so. But I just luckily through using some JavaScript libraries at work, getting involved with them and needing to fix them at work, I ended up getting involved with actual libraries themselves. Learned from some really, really great people. Like learned how real GitHub works, not just
mhm,
company GitHub.
mhm.
Learned a ton about working with large groups of projects and essentially volunteer efforts at the end of the day. and just got so much more responsibility and kind of learning out of that than I was being given at my job. Again, rightfully so to the job. So yeah, I think if you're someone who's looking for more, as I kind of was at the time, open source can just be a great place where there's so many projects just hungry for your attention, your time, and willing to kind of give you mentorship and learning in response, even just by the virtue of working on something new and outside of your comfort zone. So this is not a pitch for Astro. We have a great open source community. It's really just a pitch for any project that you are using at work, that you're using in your free time. Chances are, if there's an open source component, people are in need of some sort of help that you could be able to provide and grow from.
Very great answer.
Colin, do you want to give some final words and close out on view transitions, fact or fiction?
No, I just want to say web platform, let's go. That's really like it's awesome. I want to just see more of this stuff, and I just want kind of things to simplify and get more people into the web and bring everyone together. I think Astro as a platform is really doing that. So that's pretty cool.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Love what you're about,
Thank you.
Fred.
Yep,
Yeah,
love it.
thank you all. Seriously, that means a lot, and I'm sure it means a lot to everyone on the team who's I know is watching. We had a event in Discord going for this, so yeah, shout out to the whole Astro community.
All right. Thanks,
Cool.
Fred.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.